Okay, so welcome
Thanks.
everyone. Thank you for coming and being open to this experience. I know that mindfulness is a word that most of you are probably really familiar with, and some of you may have a regular practice. Does anyone here have a practice right now that they lean into daily? Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, I'm not very good at it though.
Well,
they tell me I'm good at it while I'm listening.
Yes.
Don't worry about it.
Are you using an app?
Yeah, I use Calm.
Awesome.
Oh, I
okay.
do too, but
Great.
it's not regular.
Great. Hi, Mike. Welcome. Come on in. Well, that's why we're here, because often mindfulness. Yeah, come right here.
Did everybody meet you guys?
We're introducing, kind of getting started now. Yeah.
Well, I met Jen, can you believe it, 7 years ago? 2013?
I thought it was longer, actually.
It just feels longer.
No.
So when I know, because I had back surgery in 2013, and I know Jen's husband Ed for 20 years, 25, when he was bartender at
Market Street.
Yeah, and he's a lawyer in town. He's famous on TV, Eddie Cerambelli.
Oh, wow.
So Jen, he's a great lawyer. I was struggling with my back, as some people know that was working here, and I saw Jen out at a restaurant, and she said, I could help you. Just come at Isabella's, and I couldn't walk for 2 months, and she got me walking again. And then a year ago, she told me about this new business that initiative Jen's been studying, like we talked about this 7 years ago. So I'm really excited to have her and her team in today. She's been really good to me through the years. And I think it's wonderful to have her here.
Thank you, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Mike's been not only a good friend and student, excellent student, he's also been a great mentor to me personally in this business. And so we're really grateful for this opportunity to work with each of you and support Jacobi in all of your efforts. And that's really what mindfulness, meditation, and these inner practices, development of these inner practices is about. How can I be happier? How could I feel more calm? How can I trust myself more in any situation to remain steady? And through these practices, we're able to develop some inner resources that are very supportive to some of those benefits and a lot more, which you'll learn more about. So,
excuse me, I left out. You helped me. Jen helped me with yin yoga, which is really therapeutic yoga, all types of yoga to get back. That's how I left that part out.
Yeah,
that was her previous business, when I went in, I could hardly bend over. I couldn't even walk up her steps. And then she got me touching my toes, which was really good.
I thought you meditated your way into walking.
Levitating.
Yin yoga is really a body meditation. So we're going to talk about mindfulness of the body when we get into lessons 3 and 4, and mindfulness of the body. So we'll give you some of those techniques that Mike's speaking of, not only here in practice, things that you could do right in your seat at your desk, but also where we have a lot of supportive material recorded through the online portal, which is what we're going to talk about. So really the purpose of today's meeting is to orient you to this process, give you some insight and experiences today on what we're about to get into together over the next really 4 months, and explain, how we're going to do this and what we're going to do, and give you some tools and show you some of those tools that we'll be working with. So I think we'll start, why don't we do our introductions and then we'll do a short practice. So I'm happy to introduce my colleague, Christine Heisinger.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm glad that you're all here. I started working with Jen in the company when she launched it a little over a year ago. And primarily my background, I've had a very long history as a university professor. I retired last December. And concurrent with my work as a professor, I have a 30-year history as a yoga and meditation practitioner and teacher. And I've always been looking for a way to bridge both of these loves and passions of mine, which is teaching mindfulness and yoga. And this business, this company, is a wonderful way to do that. As I was getting ready to retire, I started doing increasingly more and more corporate work, trainings in the area of communication, emotional intelligence, and leadership. And mindfulness has always been a piece of those trainings. And so again, coming into work with Studio B is just a beautiful blending of all of the things that I care about. And I guess what I'll end with is by saying that 30 years ago, when I started my own meditation practice, it was really therapeutic for me as a result of very, very crippling panic attacks. And of all of the different things that I tried, meditation not only worked the best, but it's what has stayed with me. It's been my constant companion. So I am very passionate about it and really eager to share with you these practices so that you too have, as Jen said, these resources that are with you all the time, moment to moment.
Thanks, Christine. And in the back left corner of the room is Gretchen Wallace.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen's account executive, and I have a background in mortgage banking sales. So not the same as what you do here, but I understand sales process, pressure, stress, and I really wish that I had some of these tools when I was in that career. And I'm just excited to be part of this journey with you.
Absolutely. And you could think of all of us as your team going through this process. So if at any point as we're going through the signature series, especially, which is higher touch and where you'll get to know us a lot more with all of the lessons that we'll be teaching you. Gretchen's also available for extra support, especially if you have any questions using the portal. The e-learning portal we'll look at a little later in the presentation today. But also just if there's something that we've provided you that you want more information about, if you're looking for some additional resources or support, Gretchen's definitely a good point of contact in addition to us and what we're doing with your group. So Mike gave me a nice introduction, but just to add to that, my background is in corporate sales. I worked in the telecommunications industry for about 10 years right out of college and managed, started out knocking on doors and selling long distance services in the Tampa market. Hi, welcome.
Hello.
Thanks
How are
for
you?
coming.
Thank you.
And, let me just, do you guys pass that down, please?
Look at me. Thank you.
And eventually worked my way up into enterprise sales, working on a national account for Verizon. After 5 years with Sprint, I got recruited by them. And what ultimately happened is I really just burned out. I was really completely maxed out. As you know, when you're doing a really good job in your position in any company, but especially at the enterprise level, you're typically pushed to do more and take on more, and those responsibilities could get really overwhelming. And without the inner resources that I have now, I just felt myself just working harder and not paying attention to all of the red flags that were really clear. I see that now. I didn't really recognize it then. So, I left the industry, and it was a job that I was once really passionate about. I really, really loved. And that's really important to understand, because the people that are really in love with their jobs, their careers, their clients, that really push beyond where everyone else will go. So typically your most valuable employees are most at risk for burnout. And it was happening to me. It was happening to a lot of people around me at the time. And it's worse now. And we know that because of a lot of things, right? It's changed a lot. That was 13 years ago when I left Verizon rather. And that was also the year 2007, which was also the same year that the iPhone was released, which is kind of mind-boggling, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Right? So it seems like a long time ago, but it also just seems like yesterday. And technology has really transformed our lives and the way that we communicate and how available we are. And in this digital age, especially with a dispersed workforce, it's no longer a 9-to-5 job in any industry. But your industry in particular is particularly at risk for a lot of different reasons. A lot of what you do is very out of your control. You can't control the markets. You can't control the trends or environments that are happening. You can't control the politics of what's happening. And you're just doing your best guess most of the time, right? To do what's right for your clients and make good decisions for them. And that pressure could take its toll both physically, mentally, and emotionally, and energetically. So these practices have been proven, especially over the last 12 years, to really help in this area. And that's why a lot of top performers in every industry are using the practices as a preventative strategy. And I apologize for this beeping. I have to keep the sound on in order for the quality of the video to come through.
I think you can think about the practices both as a preventative and also as a form of intervention.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel that you are at that burnout state, or you're teetering on the edge of it, I think it's important to know that in May of 2019, the World Health Organization made a big announcement and announced it deemed burnout, as they describe, an occupational phenomenon that has these very hazardous consequences. And sort of the top three factors that contribute or that are good signs that you are in burnout is chronic fatigue and exhaustion, which inevitably leads to this sort of want and desire to detach from my work. So I'm not as engaged, and therefore I might not be performing at the level I want to be performing. Detachment from my colleagues. And then, as you might guess, just very, very lowered productivity and effectiveness. So if those are symptoms that you're experiencing or those around you are experiencing, that's burnout. You're already there.
Mm-hmm. And we can emerge from it. That's the good news.
Mm-hmm.
There's ways to come out of it and feel refreshed and more relaxed and understand how to work with the difficulties in life, because we all have them, in a much healthier way. So just really meeting whether those difficulties are physical, discomfort, pain. We'll talk about working with the breath and understanding how we can essentially hack the nervous system by understanding the qualities of the breath and how they work with our biology, with our physiology. We will teach you how to work with your body and how to anchor in your body to just drop into present moment awareness, because of course, again, going back to technology, we're constantly being pulled away. There's a lot of distractions right now. So just being able to land in any given moment is like a superpower. Mm-hmm. It differentiates you and it makes you stand out professionally. We'll talk about working with difficult emotions and feelings and the difference between the two, because there is a difference between feeling tones and emotional peaks. And then finally, we'll teach you how to work with a busy mind and what that means, and understanding what the mind's job is and how we can create a little bit of space to watch the inner workings of the cognitive mind, of the neurological functioning of the mind, of the jobs of the mind. So throughout this course, in each class that we're with you, we'll have a specific theme that we're teaching on. And these themes follow very foundational traditional method, but we teach them secularly. So there's no spirituality being taught in our sessions together. But with that being said, if you have questions, we have a lot of experience in also the tradition. So we can answer those questions based on facts and your curiosity, of course. Okay. All of the practices that we'll be teaching you are evidence-based. So they've been scientifically tested, and the overwhelming evidence supports everything we're talking about. So just off the top of mind and at the top, the cornerstones essentially of every lesson that we'll be teaching you are 4, we call them the North Stars, right, of the practice. And this is what we'll be kind of testing as we move through the modules together. So you can expect a increased resilience to stress. So we're increasing that capacity to not only meet stress in a healthier way, but recognize when stress is really coming down in an overwhelming way and what to do with it, how to be with it. You'll notice rather quickly better focus and concentration, which is helpful to everyone, right? Especially teenagers. So if those of you that have children, all of these methods and practices are really safe to share with your kids or your parents, right? Or someone else in your life that you think might really benefit from the practices. But focus and concentration is particularly helpful with productivity, of course. So you might notice that you feel much more clear, right? You're able to access that creative part of the brain. You'll feel more innovative and curious about problem solving, and it won't feel as stressful, okay? You also might notice rather quickly increased empathy and compassion, not only for other people, but more importantly for yourself. So we'll talk a lot about this inner critic that we all have residing inside of us. I always point to my right hip because I feel like it's right here, the inner critic. Sometimes I hear it talking to me, and sometimes that inner critic can get really, really loud. So this understanding that we're all having a really human experience, and included in that human experience is some suffering and difficulties and discomfort. And we can learn how to turn towards the difficulties in life without so much resistance, right? So it opens us in a different way. There's a very traditional term called bodhicitta, and that's from an Indian Pali language. And it means developing the heart mind, right? So these practices really do help bring us out of this, the mind's desire to control and make sense of the world around us. And it brings us down into the heart a little, so we could be more open and curious about what we're feeling and experiencing in any given moment. And then, of course, increased interpersonal communications. So at the end of this experience of developing these intrapersonal skills, these inner resources that we could really learn to lean into, we then start understanding how that becomes relational and improves communications, not just here, right? In our personal relationships, and noticing how we can kind of show up in a more clear and calm way. What questions do you have?
I don't know, I'm just anxious to kind of see some of the exercises and things you do.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's
I'll just throw in when Jen introduced me to what she had been learning about a year ago, and she's been learning this since I met her, and in planning for her this business, which they're taking literally around the world. They're offering these services, what, in Australia or New Zealand?
we have 22 teachers from 8 different countries. So you guys will have a lot of material with Rachel Meyer, who's a teacher out of Basel, Switzerland. And we have teachers, another teacher you may be exposed to is Mia Forbes. She's out of London, and Mariah is from the Netherlands. So we have teachers from all over the place, but it's very exciting.
What really got me interested in, aside from my relationship and how much Jen has helped me, she gave me a couple books to read. And the one, everything we do here is also science driven. It's got to be facts. So there's, back in Boston, 30 years ago, this John Kabat-Zinn started the MBSR, Mindfulness-Based Stress Relief Center at this which hospital was it?
He went to MIT and then he worked at the University of Massachusetts. He's still there, and UMass has one of the biggest MBSR training programs in the world. MBSR has been embraced by Western psychology as a therapeutic methodology to cure a lot of different, emotional and mental challenges that people face.
And even, emotional and physical. So people in pain, emotional and physical pain, they couldn't get results. And he started doing all these studies from the 70s. So they did all the data and the science. And interestingly, wounded warriors, et cetera, got better results with their pain, physical and emotional pain, than they did through any drugs, medication, et cetera. So it's, I think we're fortunate to be able to learn about this. My daughter's dating a wounded warrior, and he's been adopting some of these strategies, and he said it's helped him more than any other services. Like at the Veteran Center, they just try to give him vitamins, they call them Vicodins. It's like that doesn't work. So.
Yeah. So important. I think what I want to stress, and we're going to get into a practice experience in just a moment, just to give you kind of a taste of a very basic method that you could start working with immediately, right? But know that what Mike's talking about, and MBSR in particular, when that was starting, John Kabat-Zinn was a scientist. And so he went to India, and he was with a lot of the like Ram Dass, and I don't know if you guys ever heard of him, but if you remember some of the Harvard students that were experimenting with LSD back, you're thinking hippies, 70s, a lot of inner exploration, trying to figure out these wisdom practices. He was really
back, by the way.
Yes.
It is very interesting. It's actually fascinating. Some of the work that's coming out with PTSD in particular is amazing.
Johns Hopkins, they're doing it.
Yeah, they're working with mushrooms, I think. There's a word
Trauma.
for it. And trauma. And they're not only saying that it's therapeutic, they're finding that it cures PTSD done when used therapeutically. And that word has never been used for PTSD. So it's fascinating.
It'll probably seem a little different tomorrow.
Yeah, we're not doing any of that here, just so you know. That's not part of our program. But why I mentioned that is he had such a transformational he had such a transformational experience working with these master teachers in very traditional practices that he came back and he developed a scientific method to test it. That was his mission in life, really. And there's a fantastic podcast right now on 10% Happier app where what is his name?
Harris?
Dan Harris, yeah. Dan Harris is interviewing John Kabat-Zinn. You'll love it. I'll have to send you the link. But he talks about, this whole experience that he had. And so the point I'm trying to make is when he came back in the early 70s and started using MBSR therapeutically, they set it up in a way that they could test it scientifically. So the practices were 40 minutes in the morning and 40 minutes at night, twice a day. What we know now is it's not, because that's overwhelming, right? I don't know anyone in 2020 that could sit and practice 40 minutes twice a day. And we're not asking you to do that. What we know now, because of the studies that were done on that method, is that we can see and measure change neurologically in the neural pathways of the brain, in the gray matter of the brain increasing by just practicing for 5 minutes a day, right? So that's the commitment, really, that we're asking for as you go through this program. The amount of time that you're working with the methods is insignificant. It's consistency over time. And after 8 weeks, which is why our course is 8 weeks long, there will be neurological changes happening in your brain. And so it's fascinating and very exciting. Do you want to talk a little? Well, let's do a practice and then let's talk a little bit about
If I lead them through the standing practice,
Yeah.
I'll tell them about, we'll make
Let's do
changes
that.
right now, chemical and neurological changes. I
So-
want to introduce you to a practice that I try to share with as many people as possible because it's a game changer. It's a very, very quick pathway into creating three things: a sense of strength, a sense of calm, and a sense of openness. So just imagine in any situation, you could walk in and feel those three things simultaneously, and they are supported by chemical and neurological changes that are going to occur within 45 seconds to 2 minutes of the practice. So we're going to do the practice for a full 2 minutes. If we had the capacity to take your blood before and after, we would see three really important hormonal and chemical changes that I will reveal to you at the end of the practice.
All right, so everybody stand up, and you can just press your chairs a little bit away from you so that you feel like you have a space. So we could even move around in the room a little bit.
You're fine.
So the first thing we're going to do is we want to make sure that the feet are hip width apart, so nothing is crossed. Right? Second thing we want to do, if you feel comfortable, is you can close your eyes, or you can keep your gaze focus center and slightly down, whatever feels comfortable for you. And then I want you to kind of touch into the spine. Maybe straighten up through the spine so that you feel the feet grounded in the floor. The back is straight and the spine feels very dignified. It's there, it's supporting you always. So we want to really kind of connect to that sense of dignity. And I'd like for you to take your shoulders down, just let them soften. And then maybe bring them back a little bit. And as you bring them back, know that you're creating space through the heart and through the lungs. And emotionally, you're just creating sort of a cue to the brain, everything's okay. And I can be open right now to this experience, whatever it is. So we're grounding through the feet. We're centering through the spine. And we're opening through the chest and the heart. And as we center through the spine and we ground through the feet and we open through the chest, we set into motion some chemical, hormonal, neurological changes that create a sense of being calm, strong, and open. And for the next few moments, just imagining what it would mean and how it would feel if you were to carry yourself through your day. Centered, grounded, and expanded. And just dropping the chin just a little bit. Slowly opening your eyes, letting the light back in. And I'd like for you to sit back into your seat and try to remain centered, grounded, and expanded. So, here's what happened in a very short period of time. When we center through the spine, and we really rely on and kind of lean back into the strength of our own spine, we actually cue the brain, the stress response part of the brain, the amygdala. We cue the brain, it's okay. I'm not in danger. I want to turn down the stress response. I want to turn down cortisol. I want to turn down the adrenaline. I don't need the cocktail of the stress hormones coursing through my bloodstream. Okay, so that's the first thing that happens. When I ground through my feet, I bring up just a little bit, for men and women, just a little bit of testosterone. And that gives us that sense of strength, confidence, stability. Like when I'm watching all of you in that, if I were to come by and give you a little shove, you might sway, but you wouldn't fall because you're stabilized in your own feet. When we take the shoulders down and back, we invite pretty significantly the production of oxytocin. And oxytocin is called the bonding hormone. It's a hormone that runs strongest in a woman who's just given birth and holds her child for the first time, strongest in a man who's holding his child for the first time, and strongest in two people who are falling in love. Oxytocin is also often paired with serotonin. So it's a combination of feeling really open and really relaxed. And it's useful in situations where there's high stress, or I'm anticipating that there's going to be some kind of conflict. I'm nervous about coming into a meeting. Imagine what it would be like to come into a meeting where you know there might be conflict or a difficult situation with a client. You're predicting it. The tendency is to come in defended and defensive, but you're arriving very open, very grounded, and very centered. Okay, so we teach that as a micro practice, meaning you can come into that anytime you want, and you don't have to hold it for 45 seconds to 2 minutes. If you know you need to make a presentation, before you come up to the front of the space to make the presentation, center, ground, expand. So that mindfulness becomes not just something you're doing 5 minutes a day, it becomes part of the way you live your life.
And that's really key. It's just being able to access, understanding and being able to access these practices in any given moment, in any situation, with anyone else around. And no one else really has to know, right? So you could just pause and really feel into what you just learned. Or you could sit, right? When you notice you're feeling reactive. The problem is that most people don't know when the overwhelm is coming in. They're not able to recognize those red flags that are often there. But when we're more present in our lives, we're tuned in and open to what's happening. We start recognizing these things before they feel like they're crushing down on top of us. Okay. Any questions or comments? Anybody want to share?
I'm just curious how that felt.
So great.
Yeah.
So
You know what I
when
notice when I do it? I always have, and I don't realize it, and I probably have it all day long, is tension in my shoulders until you say drop.
Yeah, because they're mostly here.
I can feel them crack.
Yeah.
It's like, but every time, even when I do it at home, that was really good though for 2 minutes.
That was
When I do it,
probably under 2 minutes. Yeah.
When I do it, it's always about, I mean, there's a mindfulness about your body, but a lot of it is, you know, all the thoughts that race through your head and to accept them and let them go. That's where I,
Right. Well, there's
that's
some
so
of,
hard for me.
there's some of that. I think that's where people get caught up sometimes. And that's really the value of having access to a teacher, right?
Right.
I work with an executive, some of you may even know him, but we have been doing some private coaching classes for a few months. And he came in one day and he said, Jen, like I'm here and we're practicing together and it works and I feel the shifts. But when I go home, I sit and it's really loud in there and it almost feels like a circus and I don't want to be in the circus.
Right.
And I don't know how to get out of the circus. And so I just stop because it feels overwhelming. So that's why in our lesson, actually, if you could open your folder, this is a good segue.
So I have a question. So what I have to do, not a lot, but time to time, public speaking or just presenting,
Yeah.
like you ladies are right now. And to this day, last week I had to present to high school kids in Pittston area. And I'm a 56-year-old guy, and I went to talk to a bunch of 15-year-olds. And I wish I knew how to stand there and straighten my spine because I was soaking wet, sweating for the first class. Like I was a nervous wreck to tell these kids. And then did you ever look out in a room of 14 and 15-year-olds at 8 in the morning?
I did that today.
It's frightening. It's frightening.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather a bunch of like suits on out there. And
Right.
it's still,
Right.
but I think, so if you could, I would want to know, like, are those things you could practice, like right in front of those, just ground your feet and.
What we just did,
What we just
Yeah.
did.
right before you, and then as you're speaking,
Mhm.
stay centered, grounded, and expanded.
Mhm.
So lastly, though, on funny note, there's this book I read a couple years ago called Scarcity, and this guy, he wrote it, but people getting married, they allowed him to take their blood for oxytocin.
Um,
And interestingly, after 10 years of collecting the data, the people with low oxytocin levels, their marriages didn't make it.
It's so interesting.
I wonder if they were
interesting.
high cortisol.
It didn't make
Yeah.
the correlation was 100%.
Right.
Like if you had no oxytocin going on,
Yeah, it's not going to happen,
get a
right?
prenup.
Oh,
I had my eyes closed. I
boy.
was feeling a little dizzy with my eyes closed.
Yeah.
That's very common, which is why I say, if you just, and some of you do that, keep your gaze center and slightly down, because you're standing, and we're not used to standing still.
Right,
When do you stand still?
right.
But you can also come into that when you're sitting.
Mhm.
Oh, my
You
wife
can
is
be at a
on.
crowded airport
Wow.
and stressed out about a flight and just from your chair.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
The
interesting.
key
Yeah.
is that you're going to be introduced to lots and lots of different really simple methods and practices. There's thousands of techniques out there, right? We're going to introduce you every time we meet to a formal practice method, a micro practice, a concentration practice, a breathing practice, a movement practice. So you'll get, and you won't always feel connected or notice that it's helpful or supportive. The idea is that at least one or two of those methods will work for each of you in this room, but we're all different, and you're all going to need different experiences in order to anchor into something that's helpful, right? So you were just working with a different method that you might not be
Yeah.
ready for yet.
Yeah, and the other thing, I have a real difficult problem. They tell you the things that you're saying right now, but I forget it throughout the day. I
Yeah.
don't do anything during the day to try to relax or just take my mind off of
Right.
something.
Well-
And I know I'm supposed to, I just don't do it.
Well, and that's why we give you access to the portal,
Okay.
right? And we'll look at that in a minute.
But I like the micro thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could center, ground, expand 10 times a day.
Mhm.
Underground experience.
So you'll put yourself right into that.
Yeah.
Did
Did you have a question? Yeah.
I felt stiff when I was doing it.
Yeah, so
And I probably looked that way. I don't know if you were looking at us. And the only time I felt like I could let go is when you said the words, "You're open, it's okay." And I thought, "Ooh, that feels good." But standing there, I felt like I was stiff.
So really, part of what I was doing was straightening out everyone's posture.
Okay.
So normally when people do it for the first time, everybody looks completely robotic.
Yeah.
So usually I will cue, relax into it. And I didn't do that today. But just remember that, because we straighten out your posture. In fact, if you were to initiate any physical movement from that beautiful posture, you could correct a lot of aches and pains because you were aligned quite perfectly. Similarly, imagine if you were to move through your life with that kind of posture and grace.
Mhm. Yeah, postural
presence.
awareness is powerful.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
the deal? Somebody once told me what you were saying, Mike, before you speak, like I'll take a pen sometimes, like sounds silly, but you stab, not, you don't stab yourself, but you hit a pressure point like on your body where you take like the pain towards the thumb or your hand,
Mhm.
and it relieves.
That's a
it
hack for
takes
the
away-
central nervous system. So you're essentially hacking into the stress part of the brain, the amygdala, and you're bringing your attention into your fingers, into your senses.
Yeah.
So there's sense practices that we'll work with actually in lesson 2 and 3, and they're very powerful and extremely helpful. So
They
we
help
work
me.
a lot with sound. That's why being in nature shifts us into a beautiful state of calm. So when we go to the beach, or if you like to sit by a lake or walk through the forest, it's extremely potent because we're really disconnected from our bodies, most people, right? So when we connect to the body and we start bringing attention there, and if we're doing it by just, creating a strong sensation in our hands or our feet, it is a method that could be helpful because it'll just pull you out of whatever you're entangled with inside.
There's a new term that has emerged called screen apnea when I read about this, and then I really started paying attention to it. And it's the act of looking at your email, especially email, work-related email, and you're ceasing to breathe. Much like people who have apnea at night aren't breathing for periods of time. So when you launch into your email, that's just a simple awareness. Ask yourself, am I breathing? And you'll be surprised that you have these moments where there's no breath. I was thinking about this today. Many of us open our email and there's this sense of threat. What is this going to cost me? How much time is this going to take? What is going to be asked of me? And we're already, even before we've opened, in that fight, flight.
Yeah, the system starts kind of preparing for it. So we're just shifting awareness really into other means of tolerating some of the stressors in our world. And so we could simplify it. It doesn't have to feel like this is not for me, this isn't accessible, I can't do it, right? And I also want to say that even today, after 20 years of practicing, and really the last 12 years of being very committed with a consistent practice, I still have practices where I'll sit and they'll feel overwhelming. And that's when we could use another method, which we'll get into with this experience, methods to be more compassionate towards yourself, to go easy on yourself. It's becoming an inner friend and learning how to be more kind instead of that critic part of ourselves just getting loud and quitting. Any of you can do this. If you know some of you said you know my husband, right?
Yeah,
If you
sure,
know
I think
him,
it would.
if he could do it, right? But seriously, I mean, if somebody would have told me this would be my lifelong work and passion 25 years ago, I would have told them they were crazy. I'm very type A, very high stress, lots of trauma, right? So it's certainly not the path that I thought I would land in, but here I am because I've not only experienced transformation for myself personally, but I've witnessed these practices transform students, thousands of students teaching these practices over the last 13 years. So I'm really excited to get started. So if you look at...
You still have road rage though, right?
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, I'm not perfect. I'm not an enlightened being, right? I'm not here to make you have kind of wild spiritual experience.
You told me how much ran people out the highway.
I've learned how driving is a massive trigger for me personally. It makes me feel very stressed. And so I definitely have a handle on it. But a few years ago, actually after I left my corporate job, and often this is true for most people that have dealt with anxiety or panic disorders, is when you're in the stress of any given situation, especially if you've dealt with trauma, which 1 in 4 people in the United States have. So I'm sure some of you guys could relate in this room. It often doesn't come out until after things have calmed down. right? Because when we're in the midst of it, think of a vet. We've talked about this. Think of veterans that are in war, and they have to survive the situations that they're in, which we really can't even comprehend unless, of course, some of you have had those experiences yourself, right? So we cut off, the brain cuts us off from having fully being immersed in some of these experiences just to survive them. And so they survive the experience of war, then they come home and they're dealing with massive anxiety and depression and panic attacks and can't sleep, and it's all coming up. So it's normal, and when I dealt with that myself, going through the anxiety disorder, dealing with the panic attacks, these practices saved my life, so they're very powerful, and they can help. I think they could help anyone. I really, truly, wholeheartedly believe that. So that's why we're here. That's why we created the company. So what could you expect? So you can read the Why Mindfulness on your own, but a good definition of mindfulness. So when you go home tonight and your partner says, "What did you do today? And how was your new program?" and they say, "What is mindfulness?" Mindfulness simply means moment-to-moment awareness, right? In any given moment, can I be fully present right here, exactly how things are right now, without wanting to change it, right? Even if I get really uncomfortable, how can I just be with whatever's coming up? So it's not about, a lot of people misinterpret that as kind of becoming like a doormat, right? Like I'm just going to accept everything and let it go and blah, blah, blah. And that's not true. I think that's really important to emphasize here, because I was just talking to another attorney last week and she said, well, I'm a plaintiff's attorney and I don't want to accept that these things are happening in the world. And mindfulness doesn't make you this quiet mouse in the corner. It actually does quite the opposite, because we get really grounded into this like inner authenticity and wisdom. And we are able then to set really clear boundaries with the people in our lives that might be really tough, right? It allows us to stay open and curious instead of trying to protect or run away or avoid or get too clingy, right? And to be able to recognize when those things are happening and sort them out in a more responsive way. Okay, so it absolutely doesn't make you this meek kind of monk-like person. That's not what we're trying to do. Okay, what can you expect? We'll be here every other week on site. So some of the lessons I'll lead, some of the lessons Christine will lead. We are the teachers for and your support people as we go through this experience together. Sometimes the both of us will get involved in the lesson. Sometimes one of us will be here, but it'll be either me or Christine. We'll get here about a half hour before we get started for every lesson. And there'll also be a videographer here filming and professionally editing me, not any of you, okay? Or Christine, whoever's teaching, okay? When we get here on site, you are welcome to come in and talk to us if you have specific questions that you don't feel comfortable sharing with the group, right? So that's why we come on site about a half hour early. Our lessons will last 50 minutes, and then we'll leave 10 minutes at the end for questions, okay? Please ask them, because I guarantee you, if you have a question, somebody else in the group will have the same exact question, all right? So no question is insignificant, all right? And then we'll stay another half hour after the lesson ends in case you guys have any questions, if you want to talk, if you need some one-on-one strategies, okay? Please use us. People don't use us as a resource enough. but the people that do get the most out of this experience. Okay, so we'll be meeting bi-weekly, every other week on site. In 48 hours from the lesson, the content will be uploaded into the portal, and we'll send you a reminder that they've been uploaded. So April's going to get me all of your email addresses. We'll get them loaded into the system, and you'll be prompted to create a username and password for the portal access, and I'll show you that in a minute. Once the video of our class is uploaded, we also include supportive materials to use over the next 2 weeks while we're not together. They will include guided meditations and audio files. They'll include movement practices, standing meditations like we just did, walking meditations. They may include breathing practices. They may include teacher talks or outside links to some of our teachers that we've worked with. Okay, so all of the material in there supports the main themes of the lessons that we taught. So we're just dripping it out there so you're not overwhelmed. Okay, every week we'll add more to that, and you'll still have access to all the lessons that we did previously, but you won't be able to go ahead in the portal until we do the lesson on site. Okay, additionally, if you're out of town and you don't want to watch a recording, just let us know, and we'll set up the Zoom video conferencing so that you can still participate live, but virtually. Okay, and we could just set that up every week if that makes more sense, so we could talk about it.
We might do that for Mary.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's perfect.
She came down with the flu today, so she wasn't.
Oh, it's going around. Sorry, I think we're still good. So if you go to page 2, you'll see all of our lessons with dates. We'll be back here on February 25th, and this will be an introductory class and teaching you how to use the body and the breath as an anchor and what that means. Okay, and I'll be leading you through that class. On March 10th, that's lesson 2, mindfulness of breath, and Christine will be leading that class for the group, teaching you different methods of working with the breath, which is very powerful. Okay. And March 24th, mindfulness of the body, part 1 and 2. You'll probably have both of us for one of those lessons. It'll be either me or Christine working with you. Then we'll get into the mindfulness of feelings. Mindfulness of feelings has 3 parts, and Christine will be teaching all 3 of those lessons because she's weaving in some professional development work in with those lessons. So they're very, very, very powerful, and definitely try to be here, especially for that content live as much as you can. And then I'll be wrapping us up with lesson 8 on June 2nd. That's crazy, right? That's how quickly it'll be.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. Any questions on the agenda or what to expect in the class?
When you're doing this, when do we see the other people, like from the other places that you said?
They're all included. So we film content in advance, and that's bundled into the portal.
Okay.
And I'll show you that now. Yeah.
Jen, do you need the TV to pass that up onto the television? You guys Bluetooth.
Yeah, if we can.
You know, you wanna go from Apple?
I think we couldn't do it from Apple, right?
I think we had trouble with it last time. Now, if I could just log in, we could just go to the website if that has,
I'll bring my laptop over.
yeah,
Just do that.
because I sent you the link.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Christine has a background in communication and professional development also, and that's what we asked if they could weave that in a little bit. Nina, people, a bunch of us were at a presentation 2 months ago, and it's really, remember that Invesco? And they just changed the words, and they, like the proper, when you're communicating, what you say, how you say it, if you're mindful of those. But it's incredible how framing and terminology makes all the difference in the world. And so we're grateful that Christine's able to give us some of her wisdom on that. No pressure.
Yeah. Now, Christine,
It's powerful when you can take these practices and have it show up in your professional and personal life.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's actually an article in here, and I would encourage each of you to read it. And this was actually sent to me by another client who is in your industry, and he just got it from the Wall Street Journal. And so it's just about meditation for stockbrokers. And it'll be, I think you'll all find it really helpful. There's also, you distributed the white paper a few months back. Did you guys get that?
Yeah.
I'll redistribute it if you didn't get it, but you may be more interested in reading it now. But there's a white paper on mindfulness specifically for financial advisors in the financial services industry. Based on our studies and opinions of a lot of other people, the financial services industry is only second behind healthcare in risk for burnout and burnout related issues like anxiety and depression. So, you know, it's something just to pay attention to. It doesn't mean that it's happening to you. It certainly doesn't mean that you're broken. We're not here for that. We're actually here to help you really believe that you have everything inside already to work with life in 2020 in a really productive way.
So as participants, I could think when you said question, what are your expectations of us? Aside from
Yes.
my mother-in-law has to write a term paper and present it to all of us?
Yes, Fritz. Yep. You. So my expectations to you, not starting tomorrow, starting the day after our first lesson, right, is that you will commit to practice. And we'll talk a lot about that in the first lesson. Just 5 minutes a day is what we're looking for. So what you could start thinking about now, which will be helpful, is what time of day feels most supportive to me personally, my constitution, right? So I want you all to ask yourselves that question. Are you a morning person? Do you naturally wake up early? What's your energy like, right? What are you a night person? Do you like to stay up late? Is the house quiet then? You know, depending on whether you have young children or families, is it supportive to come home and take a few minutes to do it then? Does it feel best to try it a couple different times and figure that out, right? Don't expect any of these practices to feel right away. Instead, get curious about what your experience is, and that will inform some of these decisions, right? So it's learning how to pay attention and feel really interested in what's happening without judgment. And remember, if you miss a day, that you could just start again the next day, right? Nobody's going to shame you if you're not meditating every day.
I'm going to shame you.
That's nothing in the moment, you know, pop up.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Very nice.
Lastly, and we'll get into the portal in a second. Okay, great. Awesome. Thanks, April.
Sure.
Okay, so this is the Studio B portal. So this is where you'll be prompted to go and get logged in and sign up. Okay. Now, because I'm already, actually, April, this is your computer. So we could use you as an example if that's okay. So it's APRIL, and I don't know your.
Oh, okay, so it's longer. It's A Vinciarelli.
Okay, VIN.
CIARELLI at Jacobi.
Okay. I'm not sure if this is set up for, actually, I'm going to have to sign in as me.
Okay.
Because Jake doesn't have you loaded in the system yet.
Got it. Okay.
I'm so sorry. I forgot to mark it on my calendar. I have an appointment coming right now. So I appreciate you guys coming, and I'm excited for it though.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
Okay, so here we are. This is the Studio B password. This is what you'll see when you log in. All right. We'll have featured videos. They'll change as we go through the course together. We can even look at this one now if you guys, I know that some of you need to jump, so I'll just get through this and offer that at the end, okay? The community feed is great because this is where you could go to ask any questions or share resources or comment on any of the materials. We'll be checking the community feed every day. So it's the best and easiest way to reach us if you're already in there. Also, this is only shared with the people that are participating in this experience. So no one, even within your organization, you know, if there's somebody within the group here that's not participating in the training, they won't have access to this. So it'll just be your group, okay? When we get into our content, and so there's a demo in here now, and that will be shifted. And you'll notice your, you know, Jacobi Capital is, you'll see your logo up here. You'll always feel familiar that this is where you're supposed to be. If you don't see your logo, let us know right away. Obviously something's wrong and you might not have the right content in front of you. So if you go down, your course will be here. So remember, this is the signature series. It's the foundational training. After you're finished with this, we'll unlock more courses based on, you know, what your feedback to the group, Mike and April, and what they decide to give you next, essentially, or unlock next.
If we come to the sessions, do we have to go to these courses?
You would still want to go in here because this is where you'll get all of the videos, audio, and PDF content that we've prepared to support you as you go through the practices when we're not together.
Okay,
Right?
you said that there was a walking one, excuse me.
Yeah, there's a walking
So
meditation.
how do you get it from there to?
I'll show you that in a minute.
Oh,
Yeah. So if you go into the course, now this is set up a little differently.
And Jen, how many courses are there? Will there be 8 courses?
There'll be 8 lessons in this course. So the course is the signature series, which is what we're doing. So this is our orientation, and we'll have 8 more lessons together, which is in your agenda. After this, we have 2 years of access to this portal, and there'll be 3 advanced courses unlocked within the next 2 years. So some of those topics are developing, Christine, do you want to talk about any of them? Emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence, it could be transformational leadership, it could be
Managing team dynamics.
Or it could be something very specific to the work you do.
We're going to work on building one out as well.
Right, great.
Just to our group.
Perfect, yeah. So as you're going through, now this is a little different because this content is set up as self-led content. So there are clients that we have that just go through the signature course in a self-led manner without high touch. So this video will just be, you'll see us in your environment, and it'll be a replay of what we did here today, okay? As you go through the content, it'll tell you what's next. So instead of it being a part 2, it'll be either audio or video content. And then if you go back to, essentially, if you go back, actually, they won't be stacked like this. If you go back to this page.
She's working off of a demo.
Yeah. You'll have everything you need right here. So you'll have like little blocks with your guided meditations. There'll be videos, for instance, if you're interested in getting out in nature and figuring out how to use this in a walking meditation, you'll have access to those practices in the media library. Okay. Now the media library we won't unlock all of the content for you right away, because we don't want you to get ahead of yourselves, right? Because there could be some advanced practices that will make you feel like this is not for me and I can't do it, right? So we want you to just kind of take it really slow and don't rush it, the experience. Just work with what you're giving you, because there is a method to the madness. But once you get through the course, you'll have all of your content here and all of the practices. So for instance, this is Rachel. Sorry. And if we go into Rachel's video here, and this was filmed in Switzerland a few weeks ago, actually. And you'll see the YouTube. You can't go to YouTube though and access these videos. They're not publicly released. Looks like we have a signal issue, maybe.
Oh, the volume is turned off. I'm sorry. On the
That's
top-
okay.
On the top part of the computer itself, like on the computer. Oh, on the computer.
Oh, on the
itself.
computer.
Yeah,
I'm
on
sorry.
the top part of the the
I
long
see
part
it.
up top. No, it's on the top there.
Yeah.
There you go. Oh, well, I don't know why it's not working because you're up to 100. That's gonna be really loud.
Let's see. I'm not sure what happens there.
My email dings when my computer is closed, so
Uh,
I just keep the volume on low because I hear it all day long. And my dad.
I don't know what happened, Mike. We got out of it somehow.
And that computer will
Yeah.
There we go. Let's go back in.
No, I'm just saying for this,
Uh,
like the laptop, you can move, right?
We're gonna be here for it.
you could also log in on your phone, or iPad or whatever. Yeah, it doesn't have to
Or
be.
even on desktop. Like if you wanted to log in after the fact.
I'm gonna do all my meditating in Mike's office. You're gonna need my laptop.
I need the laptop though. Look at that.
You want to get a couch for your
Okay,
office.
so I'm going to go back to the dashboard, and I'm going to show you the introductory video. Okay, on what is mindfulness.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We fixed it. Mindfulness really is a natural human capacity. And I love that. I love that idea and thought and how to express that to you and anybody, right? Is that we all have the capacity to be more present and open to our lives just as they are. Right? And that acceptance is a game changer. Like, this is just how we're supposed to be, right? In our lives completely. And we've forgotten that somehow. We've been pulled away from that reality, or we don't trust it anymore. Like, we feel like we're supposed to be somewhere else, or paying attention to everything or nothing, right? And the reality is, life is complicated and it is busy. But what if we could be in those busy moments wholeheartedly? Never been anywhere in a body of water that was very calm, in the lake or in the ocean, and you look down and you can see everything. You can see the sand, shells, the fish, your own feet. That's the mind. That is the outcome of daily practice. That's the mind that helps me to be able to see right to the bottom. It's that kind of clarity and that kind of insight. We can live there in the place, you know, you don't have to live away from it. And so often we're pulled away, right? We're pulled away because of this world we live in. It's just so distracting. And yes, we still have to get stuff done, but what would it mean if you could be in your work wholeheartedly and see the beauty of it? What would it mean to be in the suffering of life and shift your vantage point to see also that as precious? I think that's where meditation begins, in those short, small, beautiful moments. Yeah, and we all have access to it. Mindfulness is moment-to-moment awareness
of what is here and now without it having to be anything other than it is. Moment to moment awareness of what is here and now without my having to change it, fix it, resolve it, make it different, minimize it, dramatize it, reduce it. It's just, can I be with what is here and now, no matter what it is? That's mindfulness.
It's the remedy that people need right now. In 2019, right, with the world as chaotic as it is, but at the pace that we're living at, we need to slow things down. People don't know how to do that. Some people don't even know that they're suffering, right? They're just experiencing pain. They don't have healthy relationships. They're disconnected from their children. They hate their work. I mean, mindfulness is the remedy. So the work is inside. And when we realize that we can develop these inner resources that are really supportive and that life improves when we commit to self-care, that's a rippling effect out into all of their personal relationships, into their environment that they're working in, operating in. And that ripples out into the community. We've seen it happen here. And if it can happen in Northeast Pennsylvania, it can happen anywhere. So it's important work. So here we are. Thank you. So we try. Oh, that's another video, but we'll share that with you next week. Thank you for your attention today and your curiosity and being open to trying something different. We're really excited to be working with all of you, each of you, and can't wait to get started.
Thank you. Good, thanks.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jen.
Good
You're
stuff.
welcome.
Good
Thank
stuff.
you.
So I have a question. So how do
Yeah.
we do 5 minutes a day for next week, or we don't know?
I don't want you to get started without your first lesson. I'd like you to start thinking about supportive space inside your home or office. Okay. I'd also like you to start thinking about time of days that feel like, oh, this might be a good time of day to give this a try. But also be willing to shift that if when you actually do give it a try, it doesn't feel right. Okay, so be open for that changing. Yeah. Also get a journal or a notebook, whatever, but just dedicate that journal to this experience. A prompt that you could potentially work on is consider what it is exactly that made you want to give this a try. Okay, so, and it could be, oh, because Mike asked me, and that's fine, right? But was there something within Mike that you notice that you're curious about, right? An aspiration or motivation, trying to really get to the root of that. And has anyone here ever done free writing? Been journaling, free writing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you could just set your timer for 5 minutes, like your timer on your phone, and just write the question, like, why am I doing this? And then just write, let yourself write. And it may take a minute or two to get into a little bit of a flow, but you might be able to access a flow state. And even if the writing doesn't even make sense, or don't worry about grammar or, you know, any of those things, just write and see if you could come up with your true motivation for doing this and what you hope to get out of it. Okay. Thank you.
I'll get you everyone's email.
Yes, and then you could feel free to distribute my email. So if any questions come up before we get started, feel free to reach out. Or if there's something that you're worried about, just reach out and I'll get right back to you. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a